I think we could start with the ego,
Okay.
because a lot of my students, I've noticed, ask questions about the ego,
Hmm.
and I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand why we've got an ego,
Yes.
the actual origin of why we've got an ego, what's the purpose of it, and how has it got to the place where many people perceive the ego being now, in terms of
Hmm.
like being quite dominant.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what we were told was that the ego was a safety thing to keep you alive, basically, so that you had a sense of self that you
Yeah.
could protect. So the idea was that you wouldn't run off a cliff and just kill yourself and come back straight away the next time. You'd had a sense of self to protect,
Hmm.
and in a world that is, slowly but surely killing you, one way or another.
Yeah.
Um, and over millennia, the ego has grown and has become much more. What would the word be? Not refined, defined would probably be the right
Mm.
word. So that what was just an idea to a concept to keep you alive has become a self of its own.
Mm.
A self of its own, and that self of its own, likes this, doesn't like that, wants this, doesn't want that, will go in this direction, will go in that direction, grows and grows and grows and grows. And the the real battle, I suppose, of spirituality is the reduction of that growth.
Mm.
Would you
Yeah.
see it like that?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I like the define
Mm.
way of
Oh,
putting it.
I've got away with words. Oops.
There's the ego again.
Exactly. Yeah. The I. Exactly. The I.
I've got away with words.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I have.
But I think part of the trick, part of the difficulty is that we need the ego, in as much as we need to use the sense of I to walk around, to exist in the world. You need to be able to say, I want to do this with my life, or even in simple conversations, you'll say, I went to the shop, or I did this, and you're kind of emphasizing that individuality, in
Yes.
a sense, accidentally. But I think with the spiritual work, it's almost about still living in that way and still using words that we need to use, and living an individual life in a sense, because we need, we've all got our own thoughts and our own natures and our own things to do in life, and
Mm.
work that we do and that type of thing, which all again emphasizes I. But you've also got this secondary element, which was, I suppose, building up in a way, which is this recognition and understanding that actually the concept of I is it's just a sense. It's just
Mhm.
a temporary existence. It's not actually who we truly are.
Yeah.
This attachment with the body, this sense of this being me, this is me, and you're my dad.
Mm.
You're my dad at the minute,
Mm.
but that's just a small experience in this grand scheme of maybe 1,000 lives.
Yeah.
And all of those things come together to create and bolster the ego in a way, don't they?
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's very hard to accept those things, because obviously at the moment you are my dad and I am your son, and there's a roles to be played.
Well, within the ego, within that I, and you beautifully put it there. There's also various I's. So I'm your father. I'm also somebody's husband.
Mm.
I'm also somebody's boss and somebody who's under the boss. There's lots of different I's, isn't there? And
Hmm.
and you and people do react differently in situations, even though they're the same person, depending on who they're around and what I they're
Mm.
in. So the I is
It's
not
like
so.
Play-Doh, isn't it? That
It
forms
is.
into different
It is. Yeah.
faces and
It is.
beings.
And I think the thing when you're on a spiritual path is to recognize that there is an I. That we think there's an I.
Yeah.
We can't help but think there's an I because there's all this, and it's great when somebody says this isn't you. But it's very hard to appreciate that because I'm still feeling the slap from that sting,
Yeah.
or something is still
Sting from
feeling
that
the
slap.
slap from that sting. Yeah, the sting from that slap. Yeah. So the concept of I is completely understandable because it's all we know.
Mm.
And it's only when you start to break it down and you kind of go, I mean, our teacher did a thing with me again, where do you start and where do you finish? And that was a really good thing for me to start to understand that there is no limit to this, whatever I am.
Mm-hmm.
Because, it's like when you're breathing in the air, when it leaves your lungs, when it's in you, is it you?
Mm-hmm.
When it leaves you, is it no longer you? When the oxygen fuses into the cells of your blood and gets carried around your body, is it you or is it stopped being you?
Mm-hmm.
Is the body not you? Then
Yeah.
when you start to think, well, no, it's oxygen, it's in the cells, and then you think, but so if the blood isn't me, is this me?
Yeah.
And and then when you throw it the other way, you go, well, what's the extent? Where do I start and where do I finish? Where's the finish of me is when I sweat and that water vapor leaves me, does it stop being me?
Yeah.
When I shout, and at what point does the sound that I made stop being me, or is the sound ever me? Was it ever me?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you start to realize, it never was you.
Yeah.
There is something, but it isn't this.
Yeah.
And it's and you can play with that idea for quite a while, and it loosens the shackles of the eye on you a little bit,
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting. I think it's like the identification with those things, isn't it? That it's that again, that sense of them being you, that you can strengthen that sense or you can diminish that sense.
Yes. Well, it's almost like there's an observer,
Yeah.
and that observer is looking out through these eyes, and but after a while you realize that observer isn't the brain and it isn't the mind,
Mm-hmm.
even though it seems to be at
Yeah.
times. There's something else, there's something else. um I've yeah, I kind of, I've written a little bit about this in the book that I'm doing at the moment, and it's kind of, there's a couple of times where the guy I'm writing about gets really angry,
Mm.
and although he's getting rage and shout, there's a part in that anger where there's something absolutely calm behind that anger, watching it all take place.
Yeah.
And that's a sensation I've had in my life, several times. And when you realize that there is something else behind it all.
Perceiving. Yeah.
Yeah, and as you go further into the spirituality, you, with your meditation, the things that you're doing, you start to get an appreciation that there's a separation from the Pete and the Ben
Mm-hmm.
to something else, something bigger. And
Mm.
the higher you go, the more, the more small or big experiences you get of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that can help you recognize the ego, and then use your own ego to bring down your ego.
Your own sense of
Yeah,
self.
because
Yeah.
you then identify as, oh, I'm on a spiritual path. This
Yeah.
person, I'm a yogi, I'm a whatever, or I just like to meditate. I'm a meditator. So you're taking your ego and you're putting it into a place where it's on a path
Yeah.
towards the right thing,
Mm-hmm.
maybe.
I think, yeah, I think you're right. I like a way that Sai Baba puts it, where he says, the eyes don't see, the eyes are inert. The ears don't hear, the ears are inert. That what is it that it is
Yeah,
experiencing all of that?
yeah, exactly.
And he describes it as being the Atma, which is the God spark,
Yes,
the divine spark, which
yeah.
is behind everything. I think even in that inquiry into what is it that's experiencing, we hit layers that we then need to go beyond again,
Hmm.
because many people will say, oh well, it must be the mind because I've not experienced beyond that,
Hmm.
or it must be my consciousness, pure consciousness. And I've put it to our teacher before, and he said that that's just to stop at consciousness in itself is a limit.
Yeah,
You've limited yourself.
yeah.
You're not omnipresent and omnipotent and all of those things that you would associate the divine being.
Absolutely. Mira
Um,
says, don't never stop anywhere. When you
Never
get a
ever stop.
breakthrough, keep pushing. God is infinite. Keep growing into
Yeah.
God. Yeah. But you need a couple of early realizations to make that,
Hmm.
to appreciate that, don't you?
Yeah.
It's
And then of course the part of yourself that you're trying to understand and recognize is a false self, i.e., the ego, then cleverly in some way recognizes that or somehow works to prevent you in that process.
Yeah.
So it will create a lot of confusion or fear or jealousy or anger.
Anger.
All of the different aspects of the ego then manifest to veil
Yeah.
the path that you're currently trying to take,
Yeah.
and redirect you down one that strengthens that sense of I again, which is just
Well, the idea of the
mad.
ego shape-shifting is nothing new. We know about that, and but when you experience it, when you see your ego shapeshift from, you might start meditating and you have some really nice experiences meditating and you feel like you're calming down, and then all of a sudden your ego will shapeshift into the meditation, and I was talking to a friend recently, and she was saying that she'd just been meditating and she had this lovely meditation about half an hour, and then all of a sudden her daughter burst into the room, so she went from there shouting at her daughter, "Get out of the bloody room, I'm trying to meditate." And it's, that's that classic ego shapeshift, isn't it? It's gone from one thing into the other. How dare you interrupt my meditation? my meditation.
I was meditating.
I was meditating, yeah. And you don't exist anyway. You haven't got an eye. It's a difficult thing, and the thing is, you'll never think your way out of understanding the I. You have to experience it. You have to experience, first of all, the lack of thought, and when you go to that, the calm place that you talk about the different stages in meditation, which is brilliant, by the way. You put it really well. When you,
I know.
because there's no you, is there, to have done it? No, I understand. But you or somebody comes up with these ideas, and you reach that calm place, that absolutely easy. The meditation isn't a trouble anymore. It's just effortless, and you hit that place, and it's just like there's no thoughts, and there's just this awareness, this beautiful, soft, lovely awareness. And then you go, when you go higher than that, then you can start to see that, that there's something beyond mind. There's something beyond it. The mind is in the way, in a sense. It's the thing that stops you seeing that bliss, that kind of that wonderfulness. But it's getting there is available to everybody. The tactics that you use, the methods that you use, are given directly to us, and they're not different to a lot of other methods that are out there. They're all following the basic same path, and they're simple, really, really simple. And that's what I like about them. They're simple. The more complicated things get, the more the mind gets involved, and this is really simple.
But then it also, the ego also leads into what we were talking about off camera, which is the surrender part, which I think is, depending on the path you choose, not everyone's path is going to be this way, but typically the way that I tend to teach people is more about then at some point surrendering the ego and trying to become more in service of whatever it is that you connect with. So I often talk about the divine. People use other words that they prefer, God or whatever. But when you can try and act and live more in service of the divine, you're inadvertently letting go of the ego.
Oh, absolutely.
And making room for what is actually yourself anyway at the very deepest level, as far as we understand from amazing people who have reached that level. We're then diminishing the ego and serving other people in doing it. And that's I suppose what
that's clever
trying
spirituality,
to,
isn't it?
yeah,
Clever spirituality.
you
Positive, calm, reinforcing.
and I think that is the way that I try to teach people more, is try to live more in a way where you look at your day and people will say, oh, I really dislike going to work, or I've got to a point where I'm not really feeling my work and I wish I was doing something more spiritual. And you can look at your job and say, well, I can actually, I'm a doctor, I can actually serve the divine every single patient that I see, because every single patient that I see is an embodiment of the divine, if I believe that to be the case. And I'm serving them if I have that intention, I'm serving them intentionally.
I had a friend in a coffee shop, and they basically spent all day just serving drinks in their mind. blessing the people that are coming, blessing the drinks as they're handing them out.
Hmm.
You know, you can alter your mindset completely
Yeah.
to fit in with, you know, your spiritual growth in any job.
Mm.
It's just the doing of the job. You know, as long as it's paying the bills that you need to live,
Yeah.
and making it right. It's somebody said ages ago, or somebody once said about, you know, finding a job that you love is, you know, very few people have a job that you love, but actually it's finding a way to love your job,
Yeah.
whatever your job is.
Hmm.
And it can be done, you know, it can be done with the right attitude. You can be immense in what would seem to be a menial job, but there aren't any menial jobs. They're just odd. Everybody's dharma is different, everybody's doing a certain thing at a
Hmm.
certain time, but you know, find a way to love what you're doing, find a
Yeah.
way to make it work, and use that creativity, you know, that action, you know, with the muse inside you. Just turn it towards that. How can I make my work, you know, how can I enjoy my work more? How can I
Mm.
enjoy it by giving more and doing more? It's doable. It really is doable.
Yeah.
And that, again, will start to shrink the ego down a little bit. And as
Yeah.
long as you're not sitting there going, yeah, I blessed him. Cool. Yeah, I blessed her. You know, because that's what the ego does, though, isn't it? It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I blessed 500 people today.
Keeping a chart.
Yeah, I'm number one. 502 today. top
That's
top spiritual worker this year.
an award star.
I've got my cup. I've got my cup.
That's that again. To keep mentioning Sai Baba today, but he talks a lot about not counting, not keeping a score or a checklist of how many repetitions of your mantra you're doing.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, it
yeah.
doesn't matter if you do 108 a day or however many.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the intention of each one, the
Yes.
intention
Of each
behind.
literal mantra. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you need to be concentrating on. Is how can you develop a deeper intention with each of them,
Absolutely.
rather than the
Absolutely.
how many can I do a day.
It, it,
That's a massive shift.
it's
Makes
just,
it easier in a way as well,
it does,
because I
yeah.
don't need to just bang out these repetitions
No,
and
no.
think, oh, I've got to spend hours and hours.
Well, I did, you know, the thing with the magpies with me, don't you?
Mm.
Yeah. No. And ages ago, when I first kind of came into this path, I went for a lot of job interviews. And at each job interview I went for, there's a lot of story behind this, but each job interview I went for, I suddenly noticed flocks of magpies were in the car park when I was about to go in for an interview. And it got more and more and more at each job interview. I went for about 5 different jobs, and the last one I went for, I was turned up into the car park. I just started laughing to myself because there's like 25 magpies in this car park. And so I made an agreement with God that I would say 10 mantras every time I saw a magpie, you know. So which is great until, well, no, it's not. It's great, it's wonderful, because it makes you mantra anyway. If you're not
Yeah.
mantering, it's suddenly I see a magpie, I need to start mantering. It's difficult sometimes. You might be talking to somebody and 15 magpies land opposite you.
BRB.
But it's useful to find ways to make you, you know, kind of dip into spirituality, and without
Yeah.
random ways. And that was a random way for me that worked. And
Mm.
it's kind of, I'd never sit at the end of the day thinking, oh, I did 47 magpies today, you know. I didn't
Yeah.
think, but I just did it, and it's like, oh, magpie, great. And start doing Mother Mira's mantra, or whichever mantra I was doing. No, it's Mother Mira's, always Mother Mira's.
That's great.
Yeah, yeah. I always like, we're talking about the ego and surrender,
Hmm.
and I always think the Buddhists have this wonderful thing they do with mandalas, don't they? They'll spend weeks creating these
Hmm.
amazing mandalas out of coloured sand, and beautiful, beautiful things. Maybe 10 or 15 monks doing it, all mantraing all the time while they're doing it, putting everything into it. And they'll work and work and work, and they'll get this mandala finished, and it'll be an absolute work of art. And the minute they finish it, they just rub it out. It's gone. It's gone. There's nothing left. And it's like wonderful, because that's kind of egoless as well, isn't it? We've done it and it's gone now.
Yeah.
It's gone. I'm
Yeah.
not worried about it. I'm not
Yeah.
hanging on to it.
Temporary. Everything's
Detachment.
temporary. Yeah. Yeah. I mentioned that very recently, actually, on a call, which is interesting. It's a massive practice, isn't it?
It
It's
is.
like
Yeah.
it's that reminder that everything comes and goes, and
There's no
never to
me hanging
be.
on to it, though, is there? There's no me
Yeah,
hanging on to it. There
yeah.
could be me going, I did it.
And I'm rubbing it out. I rubbed it out quicker
Who
than
rubbed
everyone
this
else.
out? It wasn't me.
Yeah, but even through those conversations, those like joking conversations of like I, me doing
Yeah.
it, you can see how people. And I'm not going to open up this as a conversation because it'll take us off for hours.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's you can see how people then wrap themselves up in their own mind and become delusional about things and go down the route of like, oh, I'm enlightened, or I'm this, or I'm that, or you can see how clever
The ego is.
a slight understanding of these topics, or enough of an understanding, can actually, if they're directed down the wrong way, or if the ego is allowed to, can actually become a big hindrance and actually take you down a really.
It can kill you.
Yeah, it can.
It can kill you. And that's the thing you have to realize, that the ego wants to live. It understands that this life isn't the end, but it is the end for the ego if you go all the way. So it doesn't want you to get there.
Yeah.
It tries to stop you, which is why you get itches in meditation. When you on a small level, it tries to stop you, but the higher up you go, it can get very, very bad, and
Yeah.
will try and stop you. That's why it's important, if you're embarking on a spiritual path, to understand that
These fundamentals,
the
really.
fundamentals about the ego, because
Yeah, you have to.
so you can see it when it starts to come out. When you suddenly start getting cross with people, that's the ego. And when you suddenly start getting upset and disappointed and unhappy, and that's all various aspects of the ego. It's very tricky, the ego.
It is.
Shall we
Let's
leave it
wrap
there?
it up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's wrap it up.